Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to those that have already been here yesterday, and welcome to some people who were not able to join us yesterday. Welcome also to the people that are following this event on the live stream. For this second half of our conference, we will start with a keynote from the Parliamentary State Secretary at the Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Policy, Franziska Brandner. Franziska and I come from the same federal state of Baden-Württemberg. I have known her for a long time. She's now an extremely active State Secretary, well respected, particularly in the business community for her pragmatism, I would say. And I'm glad that you have already also shown that you pay attention to the relations with Taiwan. You've visited Taiwan, you spoke at the Joint Business Council event recently at the Haus der Wirtschaft. So we're honored to have you. Franziska has to leave exactly on time, but if there is enough time, she's also willing to field a few questions. So without further ado, Franziska, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for, dear Reinhard, for hosting this very timely event. I think it is really a good sign that we are debating this and having this also on our radar screen in these a bit crazy times, sometimes not to forget who our friends are and to keep on working on these relations. If I may say, Reinhard, basically from the first day of my office, Taiwan was important and up on my agenda. My very first trip abroad went to Lithuania in January 2022, before the Putin attacked Ukraine. You might remember the sanctions against Lithuania never have been official sanctions, but the unofficial sanctions, which were put in the worst way you can put it for a country like Lithuania, namely not recognizing it as a country, denying its existence on a table sheet. It's basically the toughest sanction you can give a country like Lithuania that has been fighting for its independence and existence for so many years. So my first trip was to go to Lithuania to show our solidarity, and that we will not be standing by and just watching the destruction of our internal market. And also to be clear with our business community that the internal market is for us key, and we will not allow others to kick some out of this internal market. So that was my very first trip, and I'm glad it was in relation to the solidarity around our joint purpose here. And I have been in Taiwan, as Reinhard, you have said, in last year, November, so about a year ago. And I was also happy to welcome Deputy Minister Chen this year for the German-Taiwanese economic governance talks, which I think was very good to have that in person, and welcome Mr. Chen here. We had excellent conversations, and also the business exchange, as you discussed. Many of you have seen that we have been holding these exchanges again, the government. We have not just holding them again, we started them. So that was a new format that we have established between our ministries. And we have done this on purpose because we think that the business relations between Taiwan and Germany are very important. And we speak a lot about security, but we should not forget that we have also just very important economic relations, and that we face many similar challenges. The transformation, the demographics, we have a number of common challenges that we actually work on together. And that is something that for me is important, to keep that agenda, the bilateral agenda, alive and even strengthen and extending it. And with our China strategy, we have made clear that any changes in, be it in Taiwan itself or even also on the seaside, can only be done peacefully and in mutual agreement, and that anything else would have massive repercussions. And I think it was important that we have stated this also very clearly in the government's China strategy. I think it's important that we keep on speaking as EU with one voice on this issue. And that is also where we have been investing time and effort to keep here a joint EU perspective on the possibilities to address it together. You will have now presidential elections. It was already topic when I was there last November, as it is in democracies, that the question is who will be running, who might win. And of course, these elections are key in Taiwan, and they will have important consequences for your immediate future. And I'm sure that yesterday's speakers have presented quite a good analysis on this. So I would like just to focus on one or 2 points and give you a number of figures, because I'm not sure if you talked about them yesterday. The total trade between Germany and Taiwan reached a new high last year. It was 27.9 billion, which was a growth of 30% over the previous year. And I mention it because of the growth. It's 30% plus, it's quite something. Also it went both ways, the German exports to Taiwan, but also the exports from Taiwan to Germany. They both increased. And you know that in the general perspective, we have had rather difficult times. And with many partners also close to Taiwan, it has been more, economic situations are not so easy. So I think these quite important increases in our trade relationship are worthwhile mentioning. So this has been an important part of our relationship to facilitate this. And second, of course, which is important for me to mention, is the possible or the coming investment by TSMC in Germany, which has been a major part of our working relationship and our ambition to here even reinforce our digital links and also our economic links. And I can say that for us that's fantastic. It's been among the best news, and we're really happy and proud to host TSMC and work closely with TSMC in making our digital economy more resilient and safer for both, I think, benefits. And then we have set up an entire process, which some of you might know, but it goes to discussing, get together, not just microelectronics, but circular economy, industry 4.0, electric mobility, renewables, where we have work streams between our ministries very detailed on some of these dimensions. And I think this shows that we keep on working on the transformation together, the digital and the green one, in trying to set joint standards, to have joint projects for our businesses here together. So if I may say, we have an active support of the German economy in Taiwan, for example, also in the energy section for the energy transformation. They provide good experience. So we bring there all the best companies we have, as you bring TSMC to Germany. And we're there hoping that we can be just as much contributing to your transformation as you're helping us in ours. So I'm delighted to see that there are many interested here on this topic, and happy to take a few questions, as Reinhard has announced. And we will have, again, next year consultations in person, which is also maybe important to say that we keep on having them in person and are traveling always, of course, with businesses. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks, Franziska. And now we have a few minutes for Q&A, and I take the privilege of asking a first question. In our relationship with Taiwan, we have emphasized time and time again how important it would be to help Taiwan achieving meaningful participation in international organizations, like, for instance, ICAO or UNFCCC and many others. So some of these organizations have economic implications, so that's why I'm addressing this question to you. How do you see the opportunities for your ministry to help in promoting this enhanced international cooperation for Taiwan?
Yeah, as you know, it would be nice if we could decide it alone. So it's a couple of ministries deciding on this together. But I think, you know, we are not on the side of the countries blocking it, if I may say so.
That was short. Can you give us a little more hope? Maybe taking an initiative in the European context? Is that imaginable? Is it possible to go around Europe? I mean that in a very practical sense. Is it possible to go around European capitals and whenever you talk to colleagues to try to enlist the support of as many as possible to make a common effort in that regard?
We first would need a common effort of Germany for me then to go around and get a common European effort. But if I may say so, what I'm often doing is to talk in terms of keeping up the support of Taiwan and also keeping our businesses in protecting our internal market and not allowing others to kick some out. That is what I actually do quite often. And also to keep Taiwan as a business partner in our discussions and not just as a threat to future security. And I think that is part of the discussions I'm really leading, because I think that sometimes the debates goes into some only seeing, oh, it potentially becomes a problem and not it's part of the solution today. And that is what sometimes the discussions are in the economic discussions, when I think we have to make sure we see the opportunities and build the economic relationships today.
Thank you. A few more questions, maybe? Herr Diekmann?
Hi, good morning. Cornelius Diekmann. Looking around in this room, this is an almost packed room of people interested in Taiwan, in Berlin. And I think a few years ago, this would have probably been unthinkable. Where I'm leading is that in Germany, we've really started to talk about Taiwan recently. We have a China strategy that mentions Taiwan quite a bit. German politicians have been talking about Taiwan a lot. My question to you is, did you sense that there was a moment in the last maybe 1, 2, 3 years when really the conversation in Berlin changed, and well, maybe also the attitude towards China?
Look, I think a key moment were the coalition negotiations. I think that the coalition negotiations, the end result, really set a different tone and a different perspective. And that hasn't changed ever since. We still have debates on some of the implications and how it is put in place, but I think the general change came with the coalition negotiations, and that was, you know, before big changes, but in terms of what happened on a geopolitical scene. And someone in this room were part of these negotiations, and I think that was the moment where there was a shift in German policy, or a new understanding.
Thank you very much for organizing the event, and thanks for joining the event and addressing us, Franziska Brandner. I have a brief question. Since you started your introduction on Lithuania, my question would be, are we prepared enough on different questions? And I would include Taiwan engagement into a basket of issues where we tend to behave well vis-à-vis Beijing and be brave in order to avoid any retaliatory measures. Lithuania didn't, but they had to pay quite a price. Are we prepared, and do we prepare the German public enough that if we don't behave well, for example, in issuing an anti-subsidy investigation vis-à-vis Chinese electronic vehicles, are we prepared enough to pay a certain price for resisting retaliatory measures from China?
Look, I think in terms of are we able to resist the internal market of the EU is key to be able to defend. No single member state will be able to defend itself alone. It will be key that it is... Oh, I'm getting a bit sick, sorry. Ich muss mir mal ganz kurz die Nase putzen. Sorry for that, I got it from my daughter. My impression is everybody is sick these days. So it's key that we have an EU joint agreement on that. And at the time, in January 2022, we didn't yet have an anti-coercion instrument. That was also part. I've been pushing very hard for Germany not to block that and to have a negotiation position on it. It wasn't very easy, but we managed. And I think it was key that Germany was constructive on these negotiations. And so now we have an anti-coercion instrument. I know, Reinhard, you were also key in that. Is it perfect? Probably not, but it's quite good, and we have it in there. And I think that changes also the dynamic if we should get similar threats. And some, I think, are not yet really aware of what that could mean some of these days, because they're potentially quite large retaliatory measures possible under the anti-coercion instrument. Secondly, we have been starting with, and we started it under our G7 presidency, and now the Japanese have formalized it, a coordination mechanism for countering economic pressure. And I think that is also key, that we have that G7 agreement and format now. So we have now EU law, we have the G7 format where we exchange and where we can quickly adjust and then help. So we have structurally really put us in a much better place compared to January 2022. And that was always part of my goal, to not just work on a case-by-case basis, but to give us structurally better tools so that we don't have to be so afraid. Because it's not just a question of awareness, you just also need to be ready and less vulnerable. And I think that is, in that sense, we have achieved, it's not even 2 years, quite a bit.
There's time for one more question. Please, War Kaishi.
Good morning. Thanks for your speech. My name is War Kaishi. I'm a Tiananmen student leader, now living in exile in Taiwan. And then I am also Uyghur, so former nation known as East Turkestan. So I occupy 3 T's, Tiananmen, Taiwan, and East Turkestan, out of the 4 T's that Beijing, the other one is Tibet. So be considered as a taboo. And then unfortunately, Beijing's coerced the whole world also to treat those T's as taboos, Germany included. So in the very, are we in a, when, of course, the reason we become, those T's become inconvenience is because of your own national interest, which I totally agree. But my argument or my question is that, do you consider this national interest short-term versus long-term that still treating us as inconvenience, especially here in today we're talking about Taiwan. the shift in the past few years, treating Taiwan is like non-existence, or at least inconvenient until today. Having a conference like Cornelius earlier said that it's unthinkable just a few years ago to have a conference in Berlin about Taiwan. And then, of course, and then to invite someone from East Turkestan originally, and who's a Tiananmen student leader, a lot of tea here. Do you think, well, it has changed in the United States. Do you think Germany should follow the step or remain the so-called independent from American standpoint against China, which is happening?
No, we try to have a European standpoint on China, and of course that will be coordinated with the US, but it's not that we just follow on the US. It might also change again in the US quite quickly, so I prefer to have an independent, our own European policy. So in that respect, no, it's not just adopting the China policy of the US, but it's by developing our own German and then European China policy, and that of course has always the question of Taiwan. And I think at the same time we're developing our own Taiwan, EU, Taiwan, Germany relationships, also independent of what the US is doing. And I think for me that is important that we have both active and promoted. And I think that is something a bit new. As I said, we have established a new format in the economic area with Taiwan, which previous governments had not. And for all we can do, that's a sign of importance, because that's not what we do with every single country of this world. Because then I would be traveling every day. And
Thank you so much, Franziska. Please give her a hand. Thanks a lot. And with that, we had a perfect start into the day, into our second day. And now I would invite our moderator and our panelists for the third panel. Paul.
Thank you. So panelists, please come up to the stage. And do open some water, maybe, if you feel like it. So welcome, good morning to this, I think, third panel about Taiwan and technology, climate, cooperation. So I was hoping for Franziska Brandner to stick around a little bit to distract from the fact that we have a rather imperfect gender balance on stage. But nonetheless, very happy that this panel is a perfect segue, I think, from the State Secretary's keynote to the issues we are discussing. And to do this, we have 4 experts with a multitude of backgrounds and expertise, and I will briefly introduce them in alphabetical order, since we have only 60 minutes and 4 experts, so I will jump right in. So on your right, my left, third person is Dr. Juliang Chong, an international affairs officer and European representative of ITRI, Industrial Technology Research Institute, a world-leading applied technology research institute with more than 6,000 employees. And I think you will speak a little bit about the institution in a moment. He has an impressive CV, which I won't read out completely, but just to mention a few things, during 2019 to 2021, Dr. Chung worked as Chief Technology Officer at a venture capital company, Industrial Technology Investment Corporation. He holds a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He has published more than 40 technical papers and filed 53 patents. And to cut a very impressive resume short, he has experience in such fields as industrial IoT, connectivity solutions, intelligent manufacturing, predictive maintenance of equipment. I could go on, but I'll leave it at that. At the very end, but certainly not the least here, Mr. Takashi Hongo, a senior fellow at Mitsui Global Strategies Institute, which was founded in 1999 as an in-house think tank for Mitsui and Company, one of the largest general trading companies in Japan, as you know. Takeshi has been involved in numerous environmental projects and research on climate change, on water shortage, biodiversity, also a long list. And before joining the institute, he worked for the Japan Bank of International Cooperation as a special advisor and head of the Environment Finance Engineering Department, and among other things, drafted the bank's guidelines for measurement of greenhouse gas emission reductions at projects. He has rich experiences of finances for energy and infrastructure projects. Again, a long list, and among the many hats he wears, he is a member of the board of directors at the International Emissions Trading Associations. He has contributed to the IPCC, the UNFCCC, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, etc., etc. And we have, second to my left, Hosugli Makiyama. Is director of the European Center for International Political Economy, ECIPE, an independent and non-profit policy research think tank, which focuses on international trade, regulation, digitalization, and other international economic policy issues of importance for Europe. He's also a fellow at LSE. Is that correct? Yes. So prior to joining ECIP, he was an independent... Yeah, okay. You don't need it? Okay. He advises governments and international organizations, to cut it short as well. Then right next to me is Dr. Max Senglein, chief economist at MERIX, the, let's say, the research institute on China here in Europe, and widely published, frequent contributor to the website at MERIX. And without further ado, I'd say we start off with you, Dr. Chung, with 10 minutes. Maybe explain also a little bit more about your institution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Reinhard, to invite me to be here. I'm from ICHI. ICHI is the largest applied research institute in Taiwan, like Fraunhofer in Germany. And we do research and technology for all enterprise in Taiwan. We many 50% of our funding is from government, and the other 50% we earn this money from enterprise. So we have to help enterprise to do all kinds of business projects. And our office is to enhance the collaboration between Taiwan and Europe, especially in Germany. And I think the big news in Taiwan is that TSMC is going to invest and have a foundry in Dresden. And just this morning, I received a mail from TSMC, and he asked me to fund some supply chains for them. And this afternoon, I will go to Munich to attend the Semicon Europe. Yeah, and I think ICHI have many years of cooperations with Europe partners, and we attend many projects like Horizon Europe project. For last year, we have one project called HARTU, and for this project is mainly use robot and plus AI for manufacturing, flexible manufacturing to assemblies in many freedoms way with very flexible means of manufacture. And for these years, we also have joined Horizon Europe project called Archimedes. And in this project, EU EV, electric vehicle related, try to increase the life of electrical vehicle for 15 times. Yeah, that's very ambitious goal for this. And EU invest 40 million euros in this project. And like Benz, Mercedes-Benz also is a partner of this project. So we can see, I was in Germany 20 years ago. And this is my second time to be in Germany. I was dispatched here since last years. And this time is quite different from 20 years ago. And all the partners we met and the people know about Taiwan. And we are easy to talk with them and to establish collaborations. So I feel this is a very good chance for Taiwan to enhance the collaborations with the partners in Germany, also some in Europe. For example, I was in ITIC before. That was a venture capital companies, a subsidy of E3. And it also is the original founders of TSMC. Yeah. And ITIC invest 3 companies in France with one funding together with Applied Material. And we have experience with this investment. And E3 is doing research. And we can work with many projects in Europe. Not only the Horizon Europe project. We also have bilateral project with many countries, like Spain, like Germany, and UK, and Czech Republic. And right now, these 4 countries also have bilateral projects with Taiwan. And especially UK, since this year, they have 24 projects with us right now. So it increased tremendously. And regarding, I would like to give one example of TSMC can cooperate with the partners in Germany or in Europe. One very common chemical, it's called hydrogen fluoride. Hydrogen fluoride is very common use in semiconductor process for etchings and for depositions. And this kind of chemical can be transformed after it was used in this process. It was transformed to calcium fluoride. And calcium fluoride, after the treatments of wastewater, it becomes calcium fluoride. And calcium fluoride can be used for steel manufacture industry. Like we use in Taiwan, Chinese steel corporations take this calcium fluoride from TSMC and using in their process, steering process. So this is kind of circular economy, could have very sustainable economy, put things reuse with very high efficiency. So many things like this can be used, and we can fund the semiconductor supply chain. You know, semiconductor supply chain is very complicated, and it involves from the countries all over the world. And many companies in Germany, like Trum, they provide laser head for ASML. And ASML sells this EUV to TSMC. And also Zeiss provides this precision lens for EUV products, for EUV machines. And they also use in TSMC. And I just like to mention one very large, I think, as I know, it is the largest association in Germany called VDMA. VDMA is Mechanical Equipment Association. And they are very interested in TSMCs to have foundries in Dresden, and also Intel's have foundries in Germany. So they will have delegations to Taiwan in next March. And TSMC propose some spec and get a lot of response from VDMA members. So all these symptoms shows they are very promising for this international collaboration, especially with Germany and Taiwan. So I think both governments should put more incentive to help this enterprise. Taiwanese and Germany's enterprise can work together and can have very strong link in this resilient supply chain. Yeah. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think in the interest of time, we will jump right over to you, Takeshi, for your 10 minutes. I know you had prepared a PowerPoint, but I think you'll be fine as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. And this time, I would like to focus on climate change as one of the important global challenge, and also not only the Taiwan aspect, but also regional or global aspect. So the first thing we have to think about related to climate change is 2030 target and net zero emission target. So the last month, IEA announced and they prepared their new report, World Energy Outlook 2023. So how to catch up the pathway to be net zero? They recommend 3 things. First one is triple the capacity of renewable. And the second is double the increase of energy efficiency improvement. And the last one, third one, is 75% reduction of methane emission. So anyhow, that means renewable investment and energy improvement investment is needed. What is a key technology for renewable increase and the improvement of energy efficiency? It is a digital technologies. So that, for instance, optimization of industry's energy consumption. So the IT, AI technology, and the sensor technology is needed. And also, if we are going to increase the renewable, we have to face the problem of the instability of the power grid system. So demand response and the other mechanism is needed. In that case, smart meter is one of the options. So all the options need to link with the digital technology. But digital technology, one of the important thing is semiconductor. So I think the semiconductor is a key. Semiconductor is a kind of the bottleneck for decarbonization if the supply chain are affected. So regarding the semiconductor, yesterday and this morning, semiconductor is focused on because Taiwan is good at the semiconductor production. So the best and most advanced type of the logic IC is a very critical thing for digitalization. 90% of the production comes from Taiwan companies. And also their memory is Japan. And also warehouse, silicon warehouse. This is, of course, basic material for semiconductors. So the interesting is Taiwan is 15 or 60% share globally. But the other important thing is Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. If we count on these three countries' share, more than 80 or 90% come from these three countries. So these three countries are very important for the supply of the semiconductor. Semiconductor is, as I mentioned, is indispensable thing for decarbonization. So if something would happen on the supply chain of semiconductor industry, not only Taiwan but also other two countries, that is so serious for decarbonization. This is the first thing. And the second point for decarbonization is energy transition. So Germany are good at wind power and PV. Germany are very lucky country, but East Asia countries lack the potential of renewable sources limited because the population density is so high. So the renewable in general, the per square meters efficiency is not so big. So need to have energy transition. So for instance, the liquid natural gas is very important so far. And after the liquid natural gas, then shifted to combination of hydrogen. These three countries, Taiwan, Korea, and Japan, has the same way how to use decarbonization, how to realize the decarbonization by through the energy transition. These three countries has a common interest. So they, for instance, and also this is a chance for Germany to have a collaboration in these three countries because the German government are pushing hydrogen society. So German is, I understand, is a green hydrogen, but maybe these three countries, green or and the blue or yellow, anyhow, hydrogen is hydrogen. Zero emission hydrogen is needed. So how to team up with German and these three countries, that is very important for global climate change mitigation. And the third one I would like to point is market itself. So to be net zero by 2050, new technology need to be developed. So the IES scenario, so we can find out many distinguished technologies, but all technology need to have further innovation. So innovation always has a kind of uncertainty, risks are there. And also how to reduce the cost quickly as possible. Important thing is a market. If market is big, in that case, the speed of innovation is fast. So one of the case and collaboration between Taiwan and Japan, it is a smart meter investment by Tokyo Electronic to Taiwan. And also offshore wind power, Mitsui, our parent company, invest in Taiwan in a large scale offshore wind power. So not only Japan, but also Korea, these technologies are needed. So very similar industry structures. So if we can have a common market, that is a very, very nice for faster the technology innovation. And the last one I would like to point out is, how can I say, adaptation or the risk mitigation of caused by climate change. Typical one is a typhoon. So the German, you are very lucky, no typhoon. However, in Southeast Asia, very big typhoon and attacks. So recently, more typhoon attack Taiwan and very heavily damaged by the typhoon. And Korea, so quite less number of typhoon attacked the Korea peninsula. But now, in these 2-3 years, the number of typhoons went to the Korean peninsula is increasing. So the climate change will provide many impact on industry, not only the infrastructure. So not only the, how can I say, the typhoon, but also the drought is also the critical issues. So 3-4 years ago, I'm not sure, but the Taiwan are affected by the severe drought and the less water. It is a negative impact on the semiconductor production. So how to focus, how to prepare for the future change of climate, that is also the common interest for these countries. But this is a global issue. So Japan developed and provided a kind of database for future climate scenario, the so-called DIAS. That I used to be a project manager of DIAS, but also Europe has other similar type of framework, global simulation system. So how to cooperate between Asia and also Europe. So that is very useful for reduce risk of future climate change. That is my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Takashi. And without further ado, we go over to you for your input, Hosuk.
My input. I'm not sure how to frame this. I think I've been asked to say a few words about trade, which is going to be the shortest intervention ever. It's horrible. Thank you. Good night. But I guess you want to know the reason why. To be honest, I mean, it's a horrible time to be a trade economist, which is basically where I started off my policy career 30 years ago. And there are a number of reasons for that. And I'll come to the question for Taiwan in a little bit, but as a general scene setter, I should perhaps start by saying that trade is international trade, and bear in mind that Taiwan is one of the most trade-dependent economies in the world, even more than Germany. Trade doesn't hold a solution for any of the pertinent existential questions that we want to solve at the level of political leaders. It is not a silver bullet for sustainability. It's not a solution for supply chain vulnerability. There's a number of questions where trade is actually the problem rather than the solution. And that is very much also in the case of Taiwan. There is a reason for this. US leadership is absent. We have, with all due respect to the Biden administration, but we have an administration that is afraid of its own offensive interests. Europe is nowhere to be seen, and that's not Europe's fault. Most of the world feels that Europe has not yet earned the right to be heard. We don't provide economic or security benefit for anyone except ourselves. So that's a harsh comment, I know. And I say that as an European, but that's the reality. When we leave the room, this is the sentiment that stays, especially amongst Asian and Asia-Pacific countries. And to be honest, trade policy looked like a lot of constraints for a lot of political leaders who want to engage in industrial policy that we heard about. I can count a dozen WTO violations being suggested just in these 2 days. It doesn't look like a very attractive proposition when there's actually no trade-led growth. Well, to be honest, there is no export-led growth to be had on the world market. That's just how macro works. Under an inflationary regime, you can't grow yourself through exports. What does this spell for Taiwan? Very bad political cycle, lack of policy option, in a situation where Taiwan is already getting its 60% of its GDP, I think, from exports, and that basically spells down to about a quarter of your entire GDP coming from export to mainland China. All right? What does a quarter of your GDP means? That basically means that your country go bankrupt if MOFCOM decide that they're going to close your borders on Monday. By Wednesday, you will have starving families. That buys you a lot of things, including leverage, which China is currently not using. and which it is very unlikely to use. And if you believe The Economist, Taiwan is the most dangerous place in the world, I doubt that very few people believe that is really the case. I mean, anyone who's visited Taiwan will very happily do say so. But these constraints and dangers that we talk about has been the reality for Taiwan for 7 decades. So what you and I call unprecedented policy dangers, Taiwan called it Tuesday. Right. So I will also say this whole economic security conundrum that we are waking up to in Europe, which Taiwan calls Tuesday, is something that has been constant. And it's not only constant, it's only new because a handful of think tankers have realized they can write papers on it. So this has always been the case. And I'll also reiterate that China has so far used this weapon very restrictively. I can talk about the details about each case of Chinese retaliation, but in the big scale of things, they have been rather modest and guided by very simple rules of engagement that is, to be honest, quite simplistic, but they have retaliated when they can get away with it. So what we heard in the previous panel, in the keynote, that yes, we are worried about Chinese retaliation, tells you about 2 things, basically. If China is in a position to retaliate against you for something that Europe shouldn't do, or China feels that Europe shouldn't do, it basically means that China looks down on Europe. It means that China sees Europe as an inferior power. You can have it or lose it, and basically how Europe responds doesn't actually make any changes in the balance. If you also look at how China has treated Taiwan, as I said, it could have done a lot of things rather than blocking pineapples and a few other items. But China has also recognized that there is a mutually assured destruction if they use the leverage. And also, one thing that happens with trade as a leverage is once you pull the lever, you lose it. And now, China has a free trade agreement with Taiwan, which I hope everyone knows. There will be a pop quiz on the way out, by the way, by the time I stop speaking, which is the highest level of market access that China has ever given anyone. It includes liberalization on services, which is completely unheard of, even on the scale of trade agreements in general. But basically, you have a preferential treatment that goes beyond above board. It's subject to a sunset clause, which basically means that it should have been redrawn. China has not chosen to do so. So the prospect of, let's say, more coercive measures, including naval embargo or whatever, I mean, you're probably more likely to find in an Economist than from my speech what they might do or do not do. But basically, many of these policy options are actually not realistic. Right. And I would even argue that considering that China has set the immutable legal precedent that you can do a trade agreement or investment treaty with Taiwan, because China itself has done so. If we would say we are all of Chinese policy leadership, we should do exactly the same thing, and we will basically copy and paste the ECFA agreement between mainland China and Taiwan, and we will basically follow the Chinese leadership in this area and do something really similar. They would not have the moral higher ground and say that, no, you can't do that, because they've done it so themselves, without violating the One China policy or Tuesdays, what have you. My key question to this is, my friend Ivan, who's in the audience, always said that, Hosek, you always fall in love with problems. And yeah, that's my job, sorry. But I also like to point out that problem is not always as they seem. problem is not whether you can or cannot do a free trade agreement with Taiwan. I think we have established that we can. In addition to Chinese legal precedents, there's also the WTO, Article 24, yada, yada, yada. I can go on for days, and a list of countries have done so. My principal question is, what happens if you don't? Basically, you end up in a situation where a third country, China, determines who Europe can do free trade agreements with amongst the WTO membership. That is something that we call Finlandization. Especially given the light that China actually have done free trade agreements in our sphere of interest. I recognize that China has its sphere of interest and they want to have some form of say in that sphere of interest. Sure, we have our sphere of interest too. China has done free trade agreements with countries that we have customs union with. It has signed a BIT with Turkey. It has signed, actually, countries that we share regulations with, including EFTA countries. So it seemed to me that there's no real understanding of what the problem is, which is essentially the cost that we incur by admitting this Finlandization. I think we should be very respectful to our friends in Beijing, to the degree that we should always listen to what Beijing says. But with all due respect, we have our own policy space. And there is a very clear set of rules in what we can and we cannot do, which Beijing has demonstrated, which is essentially, yes, you can do trade agreements with Taiwan. Now, I will come to maybe the gist of this, I guess, which is that what happens if you don't? Finlandization, one-sided. I don't want to call it meddling, because in the end, I think Switzerland and Norway and Iceland has all the rights to do free trade agreements with Beijing in the same way that we have the right to do so with Taipei. I will also point to the fact that if you look at an economy like Taiwan, which I can talk a lot about in terms of macro, but one thing that President Tsai has not been able to fix is the trade dependency of Taiwan. And one of the key points here is everyone looks to this as a sign of success. But for someone who's economic literate, it's also a sign of failure. It means that you haven't been able to spur a consumer-driven economy. You haven't been able to transition to investment-led growth. It also means not just the economic security dependency of other countries, but also essentially means that you haven't found an alternative means to find other markets. And on this point, I don't want to blame Taiwan. Yes, Taiwan is very successful in ICT. It has unprecedented market access to China, and hence the very high dependency on these two products. It has, yes, of course, I mean, some part of it is because due to the fact that shared culture and shared language with mainland China, it also has the amazing propensity to do engineering and math and precision engineering. Sure, I get that. But it's also the only two trade agreements that Taiwan has available. ITA agreement, which offers duty-free access under the WTO for IT products, and the other one is ECFA. There's a reason why these people are good at these exporting due to things, because it's the only pathways they have available. We haven't actually offered an alternative to Taiwan to be good at other things, because we haven't actually thrown them a bone. Yeah, I'll say that that's on our responsibility. And yeah, and there is a path that is open. Beijing has shown that you can do a trade agreement. We have chosen not to. And it has come at a very, very high cost. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being so clear. And I feel that after all these quite maybe provocative statements, we'll have a good opportunity for discussion, but also maybe for you to already weave some of your thoughts into your input. Max Tenglein, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think there's a lot of points I would agree, but I think also a lot of that I would contest. I think there could be a room for a larger debate. I'll touch upon some of them. I think one of the main points that I would generally agree with is that when we think about Taiwan in Europe, despite some progress, we still tend to think more about China than anything else. And I think that is an issue. I do think that China looks down on Europe, that I believe. I also think that Europe underestimates the position it is in, especially Germany. I think Germany can get away with a lot, also when it comes to engagement with Taiwan, because China would not retaliate. Because retaliating, as you mentioned, you can do it once. It comes at a cost. So far, they're playing the game pretty well, especially catering to some key companies that, well, basically maintain a very positive attitude towards China. So I think it's about getting a clear perspective about the actual vulnerability and making your own choices also when it comes to Taiwan and not thinking about what China thinks. In this case, to be honest, who cares what China thinks? If you're in the position to always think about what China is doing, you're in a problem. And I think there's pleasant examples. I doubt that there in Tokyo there is much thinking what China is thinking when Japan makes its decisions when it comes to economic collaboration with Taiwan or elsewhere. So I think this is something where Europe still needs to become much more mature in the international space when it comes to this. And I think we heard a few comments today about how trade between Taiwan and Germany have increased. We have the TSMC example. I think that's all fun and good, but it's also vulnerable. And I think that's something we should work on in order to ensure that economic ties, innovation ties with Taiwan are on a stable foundation, irrespective of all the noise that comes out of Beijing. And just one example, we've touched upon this also with wind energy. The EU is one of the biggest investors in Taiwan, investing in wind energy. But what happens if European companies see Taiwan as uninvestable? Because it's a risk, so that's a problem. So, and I think these are aspects that requires political flanking, also in signaling towards Beijing that there will be continued support, also to encourage companies to continue to do these investments, because it shouldn't be Beijing's choice to influence where European companies are investing. So I think that's something that requires, is basically a foreign policy agenda. And we've also touched upon the topic of innovation. A lot of the arguments that come from European, especially German companies, they say they need to be in China because China is the place for innovation, in the innovation partner. That's problematic from a whole range of things. And the question is, we heard a lot of these topics, I mean, where are the strengths of Taiwan? And I think that's also another issue. Yes, we have these conferences here in Berlin talking about Taiwan. More German people can now find Taiwan on a map. They don't confuse it with Thailand. That's great. But then the next point is semiconductors, and now tell me a third thing about Taiwan, then already gets very sketchy. So and I think it's expanding the power and the innovation capacity that Taiwan has. We've heard these topics. It's in digital space, it's in electrical engineering, it's in machinery, and it's in chemical. And these are all areas where Germany is also strong. So they're facing a similar, I think, challenge, but also opportunity for further cooperation in finding a space in how world and global trade is going to materialize. And I think there are some positive movements. We've heard it earlier from the State Secretary that you have the ministerial exchanges. I'm sure China, well, I know for a fact China wasn't happy about it, but that's the right point to also express to them, we don't care that you don't like it. We're continuing this and we're working in identifying joint problems and trying to find solutions. There was recently also it's a program by the DFG and the NSTC for joint technological cooperation projects to provide funding. Those are the right steps. And I think to foster these type of exchanges, to institutionalize it further, to foster people exchanges and these type of topics, I think this is something where that go way beyond, to be honest, a trade agreement. I think a trade agreement is not worth the noise and is not really it's not going to change much. It's just going to create a lot of noise and disruption with very little benefit. So I think it's at looking at the elements that actually have a benefit to Taiwan's position and strengthening its ties with Europe rather than just deliberately, pardon my French, pissing off China. That's just not, I think, the essence of it. Maybe two last points, and they're interrelated. Now, you mentioned Taiwan's dependency on China. Now, I would see that a bit differently. Yes, Taiwan sells a lot to China, but is China the end market? For most of the things, it's not. And this is where China has, I think, a critical position also in supply chain security, is in particularly to semiconductor, to electronics, and it's beyond semiconductors. Taiwan has strength in a lot of electronic components that are already existent, but also can be, I think, potentially scaled up. And just if you look at, and I think this is where things also get very messy, if you look at the dependencies, we might look at some dependencies that we have from China, but it's actually from Taiwanese companies operating in China that are a source of this dependence. So there is a strong interlinkage, also a reason why China is not retaliating against these interests. Taiwanese are one of the biggest investors. They have political interest in keeping them happy. But I think this provides a leverage to, and it's not going to lead to a point where we are completely reducing our supply chain dependency from things coming out of China, but I think it provides an opportunity to work jointly with Taiwanese companies to diversify supply chains. Taiwanese companies have an experience in Southeast Asia that I think goes beyond European companies in setting up supply chains. And for them, you mentioned that the dependency has also increased over under the current administration. It's continued continuously over any administration, irrespective of the party. And but I think as soon as companies see that there is less of an economic incentive or there's an economic risk to their ventures in China, there's an incentive for them to change. And this is something I think German companies at some point will also realize, and this is what we're talking about, the de-risking and whatnot. And this is, I think, an area of space where there's a lot of room for cooperation, for deliberate cooperation in identifying the critical vulnerabilities and then trying to explore alternatives outside of China. It doesn't mean completely leaving China, but I think it helps to build on the strength and leveraging Taiwan's position in the supply chains in a coordinated effort trying to build up alternative supply chains in third markets. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, excellent. Before I open it up for questions, I just wanted to maybe give Dr. Chung an opportunity to speak, since you're from Taiwan and you probably have a view on some of the opinions that were raised here.
Okay, in my opinion, I think everyone knows that the trade agreement signed is very difficult for Taiwan because of the China threat. But it exists all the time. And Taiwan's economy grows every year, and very prosperity in Taiwan. So I think we can find a way to avoid these trade agreements in some ways to do it better. But I think Taiwan have very strong in ICT industry and semiconductor, and these are strengths. So like TSMC, TSMC had many foundries in either in China, in Japan, and also in America and in Dresden. So it becomes a globalized companies and becomes a globalized issue. And as I know, due to the last 3 years, the COVID-19, the shortage of IC across the auto industry in Europe, the loss is more than 100 billion euros. So it's very significant loss due to this the shortage of IC and the broken of supply chains. So this issue, economic issue, becomes a global problem. We cannot just treat one company's opinions, and we have to follow all the rules he decides. Taiwanese are very flexible. He would overcome all the barrier, and I believe Taiwanese will have success economies in the futures too. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for a few questions from the audience. I'm looking around. There were some provocative viewpoints voiced already. So over there, well, I give you this microphone.
Abigail Vassili, I work for Merix. I think you basically also made a very provocative statement for Europeans, I think. I would...
Excuse me, can I just interrupt you for a second? I hear that a lot, that I am provocative. So I would like you to be very, very clear about what part that is provocative and if that is right or wrong. I mean, it's one thing to have a dramatic delivery. You can go to acting class for that. But I just want to be very, very clear about what is provocative and why you feel provoked.
Yes, I mean, for many reasons I feel provoked. And for one of the reasons is that I've been sitting in Brussels for 5 years, working as an EU official, trying to make the point that actually Taiwan matters, and Taiwan matters for Europe. And it's interesting that we hear you saying Europe is nowhere to be seen. I've tried to make the reverse case, because it's by saying Europe is nowhere to be seen that actually we end up being nowhere to be seen. I actually think that Europe will matter in case there is a situation in the Strait or whether we have an issue as regard our supply chains. So Europe is going to matter because a lot of our trade is going through that region and that place. And so for only that, European companies are going to react, if it's not the government, because I think Francesca this morning showed how much cautiousness there is around that. I think I would agree with you that Taiwan vulnerabilities is maybe lying in its structural dependencies to China, but then does it mean that Taiwan has not been successful in its southbound policy? Yesterday we heard some panelists in the first panel explaining how much diversification there was and how much effort there was. I mean, how far Taiwan is successful in that, especially ahead of the election. Shall we then be afraid that if the KMT win, then it's just going to reinforce this structural dependencies and become a bigger problem for us? I think that's part of the points where I felt challenged was more or less your point about Europe. Because I really think Europe does matter and Europe will matter because everyone is going to turn towards us. Thanks.
Short applause. Yes, of course.
Okay. So now I feel provoked because you actually just made the exact same point that I made, which is that Taiwan is important. Europe doesn't do enough. And by not doing enough, we are basically writing ourselves out of the equation. So if I'm just going to read you as far as best as I can on a 25 meters distance, is that you're actually not so provoked by what I said, but actually about the state of things where you and I agree that we can do more. I think we should get together and get provoked all the time together. So, and I think, I mean...
It's a good person to get provoked with.
Yes, and that's actually a very European trait, and that's something that we share with mainland Chinese, that we get provoked about things. And with things that we find kind of disagreeable. And, but the question is, what do we do about it? And just to sort of take it from something that Max said, and I agree with every point that Max just made. And I think that there is a lot of things that we can do. And I'm also personally of that view, is that it's not a question about helping Taiwan. We owe it to these people. If values and all this beautiful thing that people kept talking about yesterday actually matters, we should do it. We are indebted to these people. These are the people who gave us 6 million face masks they didn't have, just to help us out. You know, Stalin said something very interesting. Gratitude is something that is only suffered by dogs. And we are not, well, I love dogs, but we are not dogs. We don't behave like dogs. And I think there is a debt of gratitude that that needs to be paid. So, yeah, I don't see the provocation.
Excellent. Yes. Maybe final question from Janka.
Hey, I'm just confused, not provoked. So, do we need a free trade agreement or not? Because that was not something I could read from this conversation. You said, Max, I don't focus on it. It isn't worth it. Hasuk says it's possible, but didn't say whether we should do it or not do it really in the end. And then from
let's just remove
no, hang on. Let me just finish my question first.
I'll just say.
And then to the right,
I would just be very clear, because I don't want to leave any ambiguity that can be exploited by the interest. I am unequivocally and equivocally in favor of having a trade instrument that benefits the Taiwan people. Therefore, I'm in favor of FTA.
But, okay, let me just finish my question briefly, because that was then, I wasn't quite sure whether you actually agreed, Chung, with the need for an FTA and the need for a kind of a bilateral agreement. So could you just kind of briefly clarify what would be the way forward for the Europeans that is the most effective to actually get, from a Taiwanese perspective, what Taiwan wants, to move forward on European-Taiwan cooperation and actually get to a better outcome that Hosuk also seeks. So I think this is something where this seemed to me, but maybe that's just my lack of understanding, that seemed to me not entirely clear from the conversation.
Okay, thank you. I would say maybe who wants to take this? Max, Hosuk, both of you, and then we go into the coffee break and continue the discussion there.
Well, I was pretty clear. I don't think it's beneficial, and it would cause, like I said, I don't think it would be a big net benefit. And in the whole, if I just look at the discussions taking place between the EU and Taiwan, it will cause so much pain. I'd rather focus on things where I think that are more substantial and relevant at this point, rather than discussing agricultural things.
I already answered the question in my clarification, but I'll just add one small addendum to what Max said, his brilliant point, which is that and I think I don't actually have to make it, because Roy made it yesterday. Taiwan doesn't need an investment agreement. It doesn't need more rules. It needs market access. Currently, there are only 2 agreements that offers market access: IT agreement and ECFA. No one else has offered to help. That's my point.
Okay, before coffee, I feel like Mr. Xie deserves an opportunity to speak as well. And then, no, wait a second. And this is the last statement, then we go to coffee.
Okay. I just want to make sure that everybody understand and knows what means FTA for Taiwan. Usually it means free trade agreement. For Taiwan, FTA means, unfortunately, very often forget Taiwan again. And nevertheless, we still make a success to be a great partner of the EU, and we feel very grateful to this kind of cooperation.
Excellent. So join me in giving a hand of applause to the panelists, and now we have a 20-minute coffee break. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. Please find a seat. You should be able to find a seat because we're now entering the last quarter of our conference with one more keynote and one more panel. And for the keynote, I'm happy to be able to welcome Ethan Tu, not only because he represents a sector of Taiwanese civil society of which I think we can learn a lot when it comes to dealing with foreign interference and information manipulation, but also because I think it is important that civil society plays its own role. And it's not just on the sidelines, but it's also playing an active role. So Ethan Tu has a lot of background in technology, but now he works with AI labs in Taiwan together with many other colleagues. We met when I visited in Taiwan with the Foreign Relations Committee in the summer, and I was so impressed by their work that I'm happy that you made the effort to come. So please, Ethan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Han. So should I stand here? Okay, or as you said, either way. Okay. Okay, so I can give you a little bit my background. It's my great honor to be here and to represent Taiwan AI Lab for everyone. So I'm the founder of Taiwan AI Lab. We founded in 2017. We are the very first, we call it Open AI Research Institute in Asia. So right now we have about 200 members, most of our top computer science and machine learning engineers. The reason I come back to found Taiwan AI Lab because I was a principal data manager in Microsoft, in charge of the Microsoft Artificial Intelligence and Research. I don't know if you ever heard about Cortana, Microsoft Cortana. It reached about 1 billion users worldwide. But later on, the team is even more famous because later on the team worked with OpenAI and released ChatGPT. So probably you know ChatGPT already. Okay. So I was a founding data manager in Microsoft for Microsoft Cortana. So and I can also give you a little background. So before I joined Microsoft, I am also the founder of the very first social network in Taiwan. That's PTT. Have you ever heard about PTT? Okay, good. So PTT was funded under my ID. My ID was on the internet was PTT. The reason PTT named PTT is because I named PTT. It's not because PTT named PTT, so I named PTT. Okay, so it was funded more than 29 years before. It's almost 30 years. The reason I funded PTT because I was the system operator of our National Taiwan University's building board system, and I'm thinking to fund instant equity of voice and open source platform. So at that time, it's actually very different from the Facebook or other Western social media. So in Taiwan, we embrace open source. We embrace one we call the equity. So each individual on the internet, when you say something, you should be treated equally. You should not be able to buy the advertisement to promote your speech. So we do it non-profit, and you cannot do the advertisement on PTT. And in terms of the content moderation, we go the democracy approach, which means the user on the PTT will select the board manager. And the board manager will set up the rule. According to the rule, it can do the content moderation. But if the board manager is doing things wrong, then user can vote and replace the board manager. That's how PTT work in this way in 29 years. I'm also the founder of the co-founder of very first Chinese search engine that back in 1994. I don't know if you ever heard about the Fansuteng or Yang.com. I mean, so Fansuteng is actually the very first Chinese search engine in the entire world. So Fansuteng was founded in 1994. PTT was founded in 1995. Baidu founded in year 2000. Tencent founded in 1998. So in 1998, when Google founded, we are the very first Chinese search engine partnership with Google. And after I graduated from National Taiwan University, that's actually my project when I was in school. So it's running as a nonprofit organization in the Student Association till now for 29 years. Then later I joined Human Genome Research Institute in the United States. And after Human Genome Research Institute, I joined Microsoft in 2006 because in 2006, Microsoft decided to do their own search engine. So I then joined Microsoft Research to do the speech recognition, language understanding, artificial intelligence development. So then I released Microsoft Cortana. So we own the conversational engine. And the reason in year 2013, I'm thinking to come back because I always see the artificial intelligence is going to change the world. Everything, if you have big data, you do the machine learning, and you use AI algorithm, you will reach a human parity. One by one, it reach human parity, which means in the future, the AI, artificial intelligence, will control everything. And that was also the reason I'm thinking something is missing. Because I was also the one on the technical transfer in the Microsoft Research to Microsoft Research Asia. So in 2008, starting, I transferred the artificial intelligence technology from United States to Beijing, Suzhou. And at that time, we call it China Go Big. We are thinking, with this technology in China, we will help the China big tech company grow, and also it will help Microsoft. But actually, it goes on the reverse way. And so in year 2016, I'm thinking the big tech approach in United States and the big government approach in China, I myself have some concerns. Because either way, I don't think it's good for humanity in the future. So in United States, like a big tech company, they are trying to collect all your data, train the base algorithm, then everyone will use their technology. But when you use the technology, like you use Facebook, you give away your data. And then they can use your data for second use. Same thing in China. The artificial intelligence is a very good reason to collect all the data for the government. Therefore, they set up the regulation. All the data collected in China, the government have the authority to use it, to own it. And we already see the sign. I'm thinking, so where's the human? How can we put ourselves back into the center of the technology? So that's the reason I come back to Taiwan and set up Taiwan Island. That was in 2017. So we are the team in the whole world. We are talking about trustworthy AI computing. We are talking about the responsible artificial intelligence. We are talking about in the future of the data governance, we should not promote the centralized data center. We should treat this as a federated, right-respecting way. That's our key principle when we funded Taiwan Island. Like in 29 years before I funded PTT, I say, for this platform, I will make it open source. I'll make it free. I'll make it no advertisement. It's running for 29 years. So in 2017, I founded Taiwan AI Lab. I was saying, I will do the artificial intelligence right. So the very first thing for the data governance, we developed the federated technology for the federated learning. So each individual, so if we want to do the machine learning in the past, people will say, oh, you give all of you give me your data, I do the machine learning for you. But in Taiwan, instead we have an open source infrastructure. With this infrastructure, with a common data model, then you can do the machine learning. Altogether, we can, without having your data, we can have a best artificial intelligence algorithms. So starting from 2017, we work closely with the Taiwan healthcare centers. So we cover 80% of the medical centers in Taiwan, which cover 97% of the population of 23 million people in Taiwan. So we don't have a centralized database. With a federated approach, we have more than 120 artificial intelligence for healthcare projects working on this platform. So later on, in year 2000, we also leverage this kind of federated technology. So we deploy the very first, for example, chest X-ray classifier, and we also have the very first decentralized approach to. I still remember in April 2020, when the global is having the COVID-19, a lot of people, policymakers, discussing, should we like China to collect all citizens' data in order to trace the COVID-19 contact tracing? So we are also the very first thing. We have a Taiwan social distancing and distributed to 12 million population in Taiwan in April 2020. So in this approach, we don't need centralized database, but we can still do the content tracing. And we also use the decentralized approach to train the chest X-ray classifier to identify COVID-19. But at the same time, we are not dealing with only COVID-19, but we also see a lot of misinformation pick up just along with COVID-19. And it is not only Taiwan's issue. It is, and we see it's a global issue. And the reason Taiwan is so important in this information manipulation, because Taiwan in Asia, we are #1 in terms of the media freedom. So if you spread out the misinformation in Taiwan, almost no penalty. Taiwan government do nothing. You can just do it. And also, Taiwan is also one of the most economic freedom area in Asia. Therefore, for our big neighbor, they can sponsor like YouTuber and news media in Taiwan to echo the statement they are talking about. Also, starting from year 2020, we see a peak of information manipulation because I'm the owner of PTT, and PTT is an open source platform. It's running in a transparent way, therefore I can do the measurement. So very first thing, do the measurement. So a lot of time people talk about what is our policy for dealing with the misinformation. First thing, know the impact, know the problem, not the censorship or fact checking. Actually, fact checking and censorship is actually a very not very efficient way. So we train our artificial intelligence to look into all the news media in Taiwan and also social media in Taiwan. We identify there are a lot of generated content, which means a lot of accounts on the social media are actually fake. They are creating the chaos. They are misleading people's opinion. They are having a lot of trust issue. So when the government saying, so we use the technology, we are able to identify. We call it collaborative behavior. So I still remember there was an event. I don't know if you ever heard of the misinformation telling people you are going to run out of toilet paper during the pandemic. Toilet paper issue. So it happened in Taiwan first, then Japan, then Australia, then United States. So I take this misinformation for example. So we trace back this information manipulation. We found there's an account on Weibo. This account is not a celebrity, it's not a key opinion leader either, it's not a political man, it's just a normal account. And the account is a deliver man. So what it does is like a deliver man. So whenever he posts something, there are thousands of accounts on Weibo using Mandarin to dispute to all kinds of the social media around the world that influence the Chinese people around the world, how they read how they understand the world. And the interesting part is I still remember the day, March 2nd, 2020, when I was in Washington State. Because my wife actually worked for Evergreen Hospital, where is the very first death case of the United States happened. So I see the message that there's a very first death case in the United States. At the same time, I see the misinformation manipulation. It's saying, people are rushing into the store, buying all the toilet paper, buying out all the food and the stuff. Washington State is in panic. I said, come on. Right now, I'm in Washington State, nothing happened. So I take the pictures as an example. And my friend actually was in Taiwan and called me, why you don't come back to Taiwan? The U.S. is terrible, just come back. So I saw the news that people is going to the gun shop to buying out the gunfire. If you are in Taiwan, you have this kind of imagination, this kind of image. There are a lot of social media with the fake account create a lot of fake news. And the mainstream media will pick up this news and report on Taiwanese newspaper. After Taiwanese newspaper reported, then again, it will become a trustworthy source, then distributed around the world for all Mandarin readers look into this news, rush into a store. So the interesting thing is, we found, although it is a fake news, but the next day we see a lot of Asian population rush into the Costco in United States, buying out all the toilet paper. Later on, then the mainstream media will come in and report, okay, people rush into the Costco buying all the toilet paper, so we have a shortage of the toilet paper. So it's a step how the fake news being distributed in Mandarin can actually impact the people around the world, because everywhere we have Chinese citizens. Okay, so that was the reason we published the report, how misinformation being formed and how it's being manipulated. And we have the systematic approach using the artificial intelligence to watch what was happening on the internet. And later on, throughout the year, there are more and more social workers around the world. They come to Taiwan Lab and say, okay, I want to investigate this issue, I want to investigate that issue. So we help a lot of teams around the world, in Hong Kong, in UK, in Southeast Asia, investigate what was happening. When we look into a chaos, a lot of chaos is actually being stimulated by the social media platform. So I wonder how many of you look into the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma? Okay. Okay, so how many of you know like a Cambridge Analytics? Okay, so the documentary of social demand actually explained pretty well. So in the past, like when I founded PTT, the public forum is actually a very good place for the public to have different opinion to reach somewhere in the middle. Because different people will have a debate like we have today. We have different people have debate. Oh, should we go closer with Taiwan? No, that is against the regulation. Then we reach an agreement. Okay, this is the agreement. But if this is this discussion is on Facebook, you will never see the people have different opinion, because the platform itself will try to polarize people. You will see only the opinion that's similar with you. And for the ranking algorithm, it will rank the extremist opinion higher other than the neutral opinion. So in this way, so we are thinking, oh, Facebook, Twitter is a place to form our public opinion. No, it's going nowhere. It actually creates a lot of angry people. So you will feel this. If you look more Facebook, more Twitter, you will feel more angry, because you actually being manipulated by the platform's algorithm. That was also a reason I'm saying for artificial intelligence in the future, like a ChatGPT and ranking algorithm, is actually very bad for our humanity, bad for our society, and it's actually also dangerous to our democracy. So if you look into the Cambridge Analytics, this company actually manipulated more than 200 elections around the world. Most of them are very successful, because Facebook platform is actually a good platform for in the past we called it targeting marketing tool. But if targeting marketing tool work for political use, that is become a very good cognitive warfare tool. So for any citizen around the world with this social media, with this machine learning technology, we could generate a lot of content through account. Then you can form a lot of fake opinion, not misleading people's thinking on the social media. And that is what we observe in Taiwan, and we keep publish the result to let Taiwanese people know. So I would say, if we can give more example. For example, when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, the United States House Speaker, every one of 4 messages on Taiwanese social media is actually created by the true accounts. And we also observed before Russia invaded Ukraine, on Twitter, if this account ever talk about Ukraine, 1 of 10 accounts is actually manipulated account that is pro-Russia. And what did they say? Number 1 narrative they are using is saying Ukraine is doing genocide. Number 2 is 9% is saying Ukraine is doing genocide. 5% saying if you support Ukraine, then you are a bad guy. So starting people from supporting Ukraine. So we see tons of these narratives. Because we are in Taiwan, the very interesting thing we observed is the information manipulated in Ukraine and Twitter in English. We also observe the same narrative that is being used on PTT in Mandarin. So it is a global operation and information manipulation. It's not only targeting Taiwan. like a toilet paper stuff, run in Taiwan first, then run other country. And Russia, Ukraine information manipulation, it actually happened before the Russia invaded Ukraine. Oh, sorry, can I have some water? And recently, we also funded, so in September 27, the Open University in Israel. In September 27, he actually visited Taiwan Lab. We talked about the information manipulation. And we found there are similar manipulations is saying Israel is doing genocide in September 27. And after 10 days, Hamas attacked Israel. So you can see the signal. And we saw those troll accounts. Originally have 1 month no activity, but before the Hamas attacked Israel, lots of activity. It tries to mislead people on the internet, in Mandarin and in English. That's what we observed. And if we look into the presidential election in Taiwan, I don't know how much. How much you think the platform like Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok are neutral? No, that's good. Platform is not neutral because we have a clear evidence. Each platform is 3 major platforms is manipulating 3 major presidential elections. So if you look into a TikTok platform, you already help Taiwanese people decide who is the president. So I have a very good chart in the slide, but because Dr. Han said we cannot use PowerPoint today, so you are interested in this material, give me your business card. I will send to you. So the platform will help your citizen to decide who is the best presidential candidate. And at the same time, Twitter and Facebook, we can clearly observe they are also manipulating Taiwanese presidential election as well as United States presidential election. And 2 platforms, Twitter and Facebook, they are supporting different parties. So I won't tell you the results because it's public. So if you want to have the material, tell me, I will send you. So this is my final conclusion. So in Taiwan Lab, we are doing the artificial intelligence. The reason we funded Taiwan Lab because we want to put human back into the technology, and we want to develop responsible technology. And Taiwan, at this moment, I would say not only Taiwan, the world at this moment is under attack of our democracy. And we call it cognitive warfare. And this is a continuously attack, not including an attack 3 weeks in Taiwan, egg debunking here. Actually, our Ministry of Agriculture resigned, just 3 weeks operation. There's no sense in debunking because every debunk, there were tons of debunk your debunking misinformation. So for the shortage of egg list, for example, although Taiwan Fact Check Center have more than 10 fact check, but it's useless because if we look into the battlefield through our artificial intelligence, there are more than hundreds of battlefield. How can human beings can debunk so many topics? Even you debunk, the citizen won't trust. So today, at this moment, the artificial intelligence, the generative AI, ChatGPT capable, technology is already being used for attacking our humanity, attacking our democracy. So Taiwan Airlab, we are here. So you care about this issue, welcome to talk with us. We should collaborate. We should become an alliance. And Taiwan is actually the fine line of the misinformation war. We are keep under attack, and we will show our experience. But we cannot stand by ourselves because it's uphill in battle. So I welcome if any party in the European Union, you are interested in the ethic of the artificial intelligence, you are interested in the future policy making, welcome to contact us. I'm a technical guy. I don't know foreign policy, but I know technology. I can use our language to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. This has been extremely exciting, but at the same time, we're running out of time. And for that reason, I would propose that those of you who want to get back to Ethan with questions, do that bilaterally. But I would also propose that we share the PowerPoint presentation that he has prepared with everybody of whom we have an email address so that you can dig deeper into what he had to say. Thank you so much. That was excellent. And now for our last panel, I would like Abigail, the moderator, to come to the front, and all the panelists also, please.
You can sit, I think, free sitting. I think that's sit next to me, Gudrun. Oh, thank you. Evan. Okay. But you know what? While we wait for Evan, maybe he's here. He's coming. So while he walks to the panel, there is something that I would like to do because I'm the moderator of this panel, which is to say thank you to one person. And we are now sitting in the House of Europe talking about Taiwan policy agenda. And I have to say, we need to thank one person for opening that space for us, for pushing the fact that Europe needs to have a solid policy agenda for Taiwan, on Taiwan, and it's you, Reinhard, so thank you very much. And so, we are the last panel, and I have to say the past 24 hours have been put with a lot of questions. Some of them have been answered, others have not. We heard some provocation this morning, some confusion, so here we are going to try to make some sense out of it. And it's a big question. It's the question of what do we do as Europe, what does Germany do? I'm French, so I can ask the question to the Germans, what do you do? And how do we create some coherence with our partners, and first and foremost, with the US? I think Petra Sigmund yesterday started with describing what's the fact that Taiwan is now part of Germany's China strategy. So in a way, it's a step forward. The fact that it's very clear the EU has its own one China policy, and this is the way we evolve. So are we on track in Germany? Is Germany, where is the next step for Germany? That's a question for you as Germans as member of the Bundestag, I think, as well. Yesterday, we had the Prime Minister saying and giving some hope on the fact that there could be some new tracks and new dynamism into the EU-Taiwan agenda. I'm very happy to hear that. And that's a question for all of us. The end of the Commission mandate, the mandate of the Commission is coming to an end, so the clock is ticking. Are we on track, or have we missed a lot of things on bringing and shaping European response as regards Taiwan and the challenges we have ahead of us? Obviously, we sit here, we are here in Berlin, while some people are meeting in San Francisco tomorrow. And that's going to have a tremendous effect on us. We need to be honest about it. So we are very happy to have you, Evan, on the panel to basically also help us figure out the space of Europe in that. And I think we heard some voices this morning questioning that. So to debunk all these questions, I'm really happy to moderate this panel with brilliant people. Agnieszka Brugger, you're a member of the Bundestag, a member of the Green Party, and you're looking at the group initiative on foreign policy, on defense, and on development policy. And I have to say, you promote feminist foreign policy, and this needs to be mentioned. Markus, you're also a member of the Parliament, of the Bundestag. You're a member of the Defense Committee for the Free Democrats, and you do a very important job as chairman of Germany-Taiwan Society since 2022. Gudrun, you're a senior fellow at SWP, and many things can be said about your work and your contribution in shaping Germany's policy as regards Taiwan and as regards China. And I think you're just back from China, and you have been doing what you've done for the last years, which is to conduct dialogue in Taiwan as regards the cross-strait relations, as regards European policy agenda, but also in China. So we want to hear from you about that. And Evan, I think for those of you who do not know Evan, Evan is a very important voice in the US because you've been in government for a while. You spent almost 10 years in government dealing with Asia, shaping US policy on Asia, and today you remain influential. You sit at Carnegie as the Vice President for Studies, overseeing the research in Washington, in Beijing, and in Delhi. So you still have a foot in Asia, and you still shape US policy on Asia. And today we need your voice on this. So with no further ado, I'm first going to turn to Gudrun, because she's back from China, from Taiwan, and we need to hear from you whether we have shaped our policy agenda right, or what are the area and avenues we still need to do. Thanks.
Okay, I didn't expect to go first. First of all, I don't have COVID. I got tested yesterday, so you can all relax, but I would still advise you to keep some distance from me because I got some nasty bug, but not in Taiwan. So we went to Shanghai first and then to Taipei. On our trip, it was a really small group of Europeans that has gathered in Shanghai for the 18th time. It's unbelievable. This conference has been going on for 18 years, interrupted by COVID. It's on EU, China, and cross-strait relations. We didn't come away from that very hopeful because already the Chinese are getting ready for the DPP winning at least the presidential elections, and they are building up Lai Ching-te as a much more difficult person, to put it mildly, than Tsai Ing-wen. They call him an activist, fighter for independence, and a very stubborn person. They're always about characterizing people rather than analyzing the dynamics of politics there. So it was not a very harmonious meeting, I would say, including on the EU-China front. And then we went to Taiwan. This is also an old tradition. MOFA put together a very good program for us, and also the Friedrich Naumann Foundation supported 4 of us to come directly from Shanghai to Taipei. So have we done the right thing? I want to start really by saying, where are we concerning Taiwan in Europe? And I think Max took one of my lines by pointing out that you probably have a few more Germans being able to make a difference between Thailand and Taiwan and finding Taiwan on a map. But maybe it's not a very big percentage of people we have reached with that. So in the broader public, maybe a little more awareness, but not so much. Academically, we have a pretty solid Taiwan research community in Europe. And it's independent of political cycles, but it's not well connected with politics and also not with the media necessarily. There are a few overlaps, but that's still an uphill battle, I would say. On the media, my impression is that, yes, Taiwan is on the radar screen, but it's very sensationalist and it's very superficial. Our media don't have an institutional memory, so each time Xi Jinping says China might use non-peaceful means, they act as if this had fallen from the sky yesterday and is completely new. So this is a battle that also we academics have to fight, to educate the media, to have this more regularly on their radar screen and build up this institutional memory. And finally, I come to politics, and here I would say we really see political cycles. And the attention span or the degree of attention depends on the degree of tension in the Taiwan Strait. So during the time of Chen Shui-bian, China was very successful in enlisting not only the EU, but also in part the US to rein in Chen Shui-bian, not to rock the boat, etc. And then 2008 to 2016, when the Kuomintang came back to power and Ma Ying-jeou was president, all the Europeans did was sigh in relief. The problem had basically, from their perspective, gone away. And the Europeans, because it's in their DNA, also welcomed every dialogue, every agreement that was signed between Taiwan and China, not considering the asymmetry involved in that or anything, just, because we're the EU and we are for that. And now with Tsai Ing-wen, I would say the Europeans had a very delayed response to the renewed pressure that came from China. So our China policy changed, but this was not related to Taiwan. And it was only COVID in a way that pointed to vulnerability of supply chains. And then also Ukraine, Russia's attack, this has changed everything for the countries in Central and Eastern Europe. So I think we have these political cycles, and to go forward, what we need is more consistency and more sustainability in our engagement and attention to Taiwan. I could say a lot more, because I think that I probably say a little bit about our perception of Taiwan from my observation, and I have looked at this for a very long time. We have a tunnel vision. What Max said earlier about it's mostly still about China. We look at Taiwan through the lens of cross-strait relations, and that's basically it. And there are two new factors that are dominating our narrative on Taiwan. One is semiconductors, which is slowly getting on the nerves of the Taiwanese. You go to Taiwan, you're the 157th European to raise the semiconductor issue. So, but at least it keeps Taiwan on the map. And the second is democracy, which we very facilely throw around with Taiwan as a like-minded partner, etc. Again, ignoring the fact that for Taiwan it might not be the best strategy to only focus, yes, they need to focus on this democracy attribute they have and the pound they have with that, but they are in a region where liberal democracy is not the predominant political system, so they cannot afford to only and exclusively focus on partnerships with countries that are liberal democracies. I think I leave it at that for the moment, and am happy to hear from others.
Thanks, Gudrun. I think you had some valid points, and on the fact that we have a tunnel vision, I think many people would agree with that statement. Markus, I want to ask you about your work in as the chairman of Germany-Taiwan Society, because what Max said this morning, which is a very important point, and what Gudrun also made the point, was about the fact that Europeans may not know why actually Taiwan matters. And I think part of your work within the society is actually to ensure that Taiwan matters for the people as well in the right way.
Yes, it is, and I think Taiwan matters a lot to Germany, especially. It's, I think, one of our biggest trading partners in Asia, as what already mentioned. But then we are a liberal democracy, as we just heard. So we stand with liberal democracies in the world. We stand with Ukraine, we stand with Israel. When liberal democracies are under attack or under threat, we should support them, and we can do this. We can do this as Germany within the European Union. Build a consensus around Taiwan, try to prevent that China is dividing the European countries on this issue. So this is one thing, and we can also, as Germany, raise a voice and to talk about human rights also within China, as human rights are something that is human everywhere in the world, and we can talk about the differences, how the people are treated in Taiwan and in China, for instance, but we also should talk about China itself and how they treat the people in Hong Kong, how they treat the people in Xinjiang. These issues has to be raised, and they are raised in the European Parliament, but we should do this in the Bundestag as well. And then we also have to talk about security here in Germany. We have a lot of people from China that are under threat, even when they are living here in Germany. So this is an issue that has to be raised. And in the bilateral exchange between Germany and Taiwan, a lot can be done. For instance, many German people want to learn Chinese, but they don't want to go to China. It is a dictatorship, and it's treating the people in China not very well, as we have not just seen under Corona, but this was very obvious under Corona, and it is now still. So the language program between Germany and Taiwan could be an issue, but the countries could work together on a lot of issues. So Germany can send symbols. We are sending 2 Navy ships next year to the Pacific, and they could pass the Taiwan Strait. It would be a good symbol. But other countries in the European Union are helping Taiwan even more. For instance, the Czech Republic is delivering artillery systems to Taiwan. I'm a member of the Defense Committee, so I do care about those things. And Germany has never done such thing that other European Union countries do. So it is possible, and at least it should be discussed. So there are a lot of options where we can work together and raise awareness for those issues in the German society.
Thanks a lot. I now want to turn to you, Evan, to help us as well to see from the US perspective what the policy agenda looks like and what does it mean for Europe as well. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Well, first I want to thank Reinhard joining you in doing that, and I want to thank all of you. When I started doing transatlantic dialogues on Asia many years ago, Taiwan was like the word that nobody in Europe ever spoke. So you're to be congratulated for putting it on the agenda and for taking it seriously. I'm the designated American, so I've been asked to provide an American perspective on Taiwan and Europe, which is a challenge, in my view, because it's against the backdrop of three things that are fairly distinctive. Right? The first is that the American approach is both more securitized and necessarily more securitized. Because the reality is that in almost any contingency in which relations across the strait blow up, American soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, guardians are probably going to have to fight and die. And what that means is that the set of issues that rankles Beijing the most is absolutely central to the US-Taiwan relationship in ways that may not be the case in Europe. Okay, second, for Europe, ironically, my view, and I want to encourage you to be bold, is that that creates a set of opportunities to define a less military-centric set of initiatives and agendas with Taiwan that, if you're bold and creative enough, can actually push the envelope and push it forward. But the reality is also that your scope to do that is probably less than the United States. To put that bluntly, the US can get away with things with China that I think, as Lithuania and others have discovered, are harder in Europe. Now, you can make a choice about that, whether you care or not, but you can't pretend it doesn't exist. Okay, third, you mentioned the Biden-Xi meeting tomorrow. So the third challenge is the reality is, at least in the American context, the Chinese side is signaling now that it will not allow the United States to simply segment and park issues related to Taiwan over here without linking it to other issues that the United States cares about. And whether that's going to be true of Europe is a different question, but I think it's very clear between China and the United States. And it's why, for example, China objects to American terms like guardrails. Because when the Americans say guardrails, what Beijing hears is you want to ring fence the things that we, China, care about while extracting our cooperation on the things you care about. Unacceptable. Now, we can dismiss that, but again, that's part of the reality. So my headline, and then I'll just kind of blow through elaborating this, is I'm very gloomy about both the US-China relationship and how Taiwan's future fits into that. But I am not gloomy about Europe's prospects to, if you want to be bolder, push the envelope, particularly on a non-military set of initiatives. And I'll say something about that. So let me just elaborate that very quickly in 4 points. First, what are American interests and why are they getting harder to balance? Second, why is this thing getting more unstable? And does Europe have a role to play on security? Third, what's going on between the US and China? And fourth, if I were a European, where would I focus? All right, so first, on American interests are fairly straightforward, right? It's peace and security in the Western Pacific. It's to protect Taiwan's democracy, which ironically, by the way, was at the time the US did normalization with China in 1979, Taiwan was not in fact a democracy. So the pillars of US policy predate that, but in any case, it's to protect Taiwan's democracy. And then third, it's to spare the region the dangers of war. So those things are relatively straightforward. Now, if you go to Washington and you ask people what the challenge is to that, basically 99% of the people will answer it's military deterrence of China. But that is not the whole story, at least in the way the US traditionally has approached this. That's one pillar, but then there are two other pillars. The second is reassuring Beijing that the United States is committed to the commitments that it made in the normalization of relations with China. And then second, a set of reassurances to Taiwan that the US is prepared to push the envelope in activity between the US and Taiwan within a stable framework of relations. Now, my view is those three things are becoming increasingly irreconcilable for the United States, and that's where the military centrism is hard. Because if you want to deter China militarily from attacking Taiwan and in the Western Pacific more generally, increasingly this is requiring the United States to do things that are at cross purposes with, as Beijing views it, the normalization commitments. To wit, training, logistics, inserting US trainers onto the island of Taiwan to train US forces. China believes this is flatly contradictory to the normalization commitments. And again, we can discuss whether we care about that or not. But the reality is balancing those three things is getting harder for the United States. And so the US, in ways that Europe does not have this challenge, is having to make distinctive choices between its security agenda, oriented toward Taiwan and its political agenda vis-a-vis China. All right, that brings me to the second point. I think in that context, we're heading for a much more unstable period, particularly because policy in Beijing is moving in much more assertive and, let's face it, aggressive directions. I think on all three sides, Beijing, Taipei, Washington, things are changing that make the presumptions and assumptions that we all had about how to keep the peace much more open-ended than they were for the last 30 or 40 years. In Beijing, to be blunt about it, the balance of power is shifting in China's favor. Military power, economic power, financial power. And as the balance of power shifts in China's favor, it creates temptations to use that power to coerce Taiwan. Coercion of Taiwan, it's not an event. I think Americans, we're very simple people. We tend to think in binaries. It's war or peace. If it's going to be war, it's like invasion or not invasion. I don't think that's how people in Beijing think about it. It's not an event, it's a process. And if it's a process, it means Beijing has a lot of instruments on which to draw. In Taipei, we heard about this a lot yesterday. Generational change, all of these things are changing the attractiveness of relations across the mainland. And in Washington, if I may be really blunt about it, you have a lot of people who basically want to relitigate the last 40 years of US-China relations. To put it simply, they think Taiwan got a bad deal, China got a good deal, and they'd like to change the deal. They'd like to change the deal. And so to do that, they're pushing the boundaries on things like officiality and exchanges. So that's a recipe for instability. Now, what does that mean for Europe? I think the reality is Europe doesn't have much of a role to play on the security balancing of China. But my view is that this is not a binary for Beijing because, as I said, coercion of Taiwan is a process, not an event. And so what that means is that there are 375 other tools in the kit bag that Beijing has that it can pull out to give Taiwan a really unpleasant experience. That includes everything from cyber attacks to attacks on the financial system to attacks on critical infrastructure. There are a whole variety of non-kinetic things that China can do to inflict pain in an effort to coerce Taiwan. And so there is a security agenda for Europe that is not as focused on military balancing, but is focused on counter-coercion, especially in a non-kinetic sense. That includes cyber defense, critical infrastructure protection, countering misinformation and disinformation that's destabilizing in the Taiwan political context. There is a role for Europe on that. All right, that brings me to my third point. What's happening between the US and China? What's happening between the US and China is that Taiwan is increasingly front and center in their relationship because both sides are pointing the finger and blaming the other for the destabilization of the commitments they made to each other. The Chinese view of US policy, which I think they hold to pretty clearly, is that the United States thinks that as long as it says the words one China, that it can basically do whatever it wants with Taiwan with impunity. And when Beijing complains about it, the US says, hey, wait a minute, Tony Blinken gave a speech that said one China policy. Didn't you listen to Blinken's speech? And the Chinese say, no. That is not what a one China policy meant in the context of 1979. If you don't believe me on that, just listen to what Chinese leaders and policymakers have been saying. I'll give you two examples. When President Biden and President Xi did a Zoom conference in March of last year, President Xi said to President Biden, quote, the United States has misperceived and misconstrued China's strategic intent. And then he warned him that the United States needed to get it back in the box. Wang Yi gave an interview last year, the once and future foreign minister. He said China wants a, quote, real one China policy, not a fake one China policy. What is a fake one China policy? A fake one China policy from China's perspective is when you say you have a one China policy, but then you inject ever greater levels of officiality into your relationship. Flying flags at the American de facto embassy in Taiwan, putting Marines there to guard the embassy, flying in the number 3 official in the US government with a plane that says United States of America on the side of it. That's what they object to. But on the American side, the Americans are pointing the finger too. They say, who's changing the status quo? It's you. It's you, because you're leaning on tools of coercion. You're flying flights across the Taiwan Strait Center line. You're the party that's destabilizing this. There's no easy way out of that box. And I think as you're going to see tomorrow, There's no easy way out of that box. So you can announce all the things you want on fentanyl and on AI, which will be an aspirational statement that you'll see tomorrow. But the reality is, and as Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken are going to find, the Chinese are not going to let the Americans out of this Taiwan box very easily by extracting cooperation on the things they care about. That brings me to the last point I wanted to make. I think Europe has a huge opportunity with Taiwan because you don't have this military-centric set of challenges with Beijing in quite the same way. Now, you do have the challenges with officiality and all of that, as Lithuania found with the naming issue, but you don't have the military centrism in your policy. And so there are a whole variety of areas where Europe has strengths and competitive advantages that fit very well with things that Taiwan needs. What are those things? Education and training, right? If you look at, I did a report at the Carnegie Endowment on innovation ecosystem in Taiwan about 1.5 years ago. You know, the reality is, if you look at PhDs and first university degrees in Taiwan, it's still disproportionately focused on legacy areas. Electrical engineering, Ethan knows this, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering. But all the things that are central to industries of the future, computer science, data science, life sciences, Taiwan is disproportionately not producing either PhDs or first university degrees. Huge advantage for Europe in terms of training and educational partnerships. Second, standard setting. There's a lot of focus on China's role in global standard setting bodies like the ITU. But most standards are actually set in private sector and engineering-led groups, not in the UN bodies. And there, Taiwan has the potential at the corporate level to excel in partnership with European companies. Third, entrepreneurship. PwC did a survey of startups in Taiwan a couple of years ago. Startup sector is very vibrant in Taiwan, disproportionately focused on the domestic market. So marrying up VC, entrepreneurship, in councils, in bilateral settings, things that internationalize Taiwan's startup space, that's an opportunity too. Data doesn't have scale, but does have data quality, as you said when you did the healthcare example. Europe's a leader on this with GDPR in terms of open data, cross-border data access and transfers. Huge scope for collaboration on data openness and on cross-border data. And there are other areas too, without even going to Hosuk's stuff about an FTA. So I think the opportunities are legion for Taiwan, and I congratulate you on doing this, but I think the key is particularly in the non-security centric areas of the relationship to be a little bolder, both at the national and the Brussels level, but also to focus on areas that can put the private sector and the engineering sectors in the lead. I'd stop there.
Thanks, Ivan. I think it brings a lot of questions, but it was good to bring that into the broader context. I think you have laid out a real policy agenda for Europe, and now we want to hear from you, Agnieszka. What do you make out of it?
Yeah, all the three smart inputs from the panelists today at the conference, as well as my traveling and engaging with the region, confirm my impression that we should pay more attention, much closer attention to the Indo-Pacific region in Germany and the European Union, as well as every meeting I have with Reinhard did. And so let me first say a very personal thank you to you, Reinhard, from deep of my heart, because I learned so much of you, and everywhere I am in the world, especially in the Pacific region, I always hear, Reinhard was here a few weeks ago and he's one of our best friends, and this shows not only by putting together this excellent conference, what you have done and how important your work is, and please say me thank you for that. In a globalized world, the Indo-Pacific may seem far away, but there is much more cooperation and connection, so we are not far away. And as much as the conflicts in Europe, in the Middle East and in the Pacific differ, on an abstract level, they share one thing, and you made it very concrete, Ethan, regarding the level of misinformation and disinformation. Democracies and the rule-based order is under attack. Our ties with Taiwan are certainly strong in economic and security terms, but let's not forget what we also share is the important base value, democracy. And it does not only correspond to our values. To support liberal democracy values, it is also our own foreign policy interest to promote international cooperation, the protection of human rights, and the rule-based order. Our governments have responded with closer ties, and we have seen a number of high-level political visits from Europe as well as the United States. And the outside Chinese reaction to such visits only signifies their importance. In the last years, we have seen military rearmament, growing instability in the Indo-Pacific. This seems to be far away locally, but any conflict in the Indo-Pacific would also massively affect our economic interests and our own security, and harm a lot of international important rules. This is one reason to clearly counter China's attempt to incorporate Taiwan violently. But the most important is we are not indifferent when people suffer from violence, from oppression, and from human rights violation. Not only the people of Ukraine suffer every day from the brutal war, every Russian bomb is also an attack aimed to weaken our rule-based order. And at the same time, in a globalized world, any violent escalation affects the global economy negatively. This is especially true for the Indo-Pacific region, one of our most important trading partners. Over the last years, Germany's economic dependence on China was growing, ignoring all warnings from security experts from the region. At the same time, the foreign policy of the Chinese Communist Party, and especially its actions in the region, have become more and more aggressive. And as a consequence, we also have to adapt our policy towards China. And I recognize, and we heard that, Germany is quite late to the party. In order to achieve more room to maneuver diplomatically, when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party, we do have to de-risk our economy to the extent that is possible. The mistakes of the past when it comes to reliance on Russian energy painfully show how much more difficult such reliance makes a strong and swift political response to any attack on the rule-based order. Therefore, it is an important step that Germany has adopted a comprehensive China strategy this year for the first time. And this is not the end of the journey, it is more like a new beginning. Our goal is to develop new approaches to the region and continue our cooperation with China where it is possible, for example, regarding the protection of the climate. But we do this in the face of competition, systemic rivalry, and emphasize our free and democratic way of life, our sovereignty, our prosperity, our partnerships with others, or our security. Together with our international partners, we make it very clear to China, and we should do this every day without any doubt. Any change of the status quo concerning Taiwan must be peaceful and mutually agreed. Any change of the status quo will be followed by severe consequences. And in my opinion, our German Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, shows a very wise approach to China. Clear statements when it comes to military aggression, harming democracy, and violations of human rights, but at the same time an offer of cooperation on common interests, such as economic interests or measures against climate change. This leads me to a second point: security in the region as well as on the global level. States that are repressive at home often become aggressive in their foreign policy. We all know the reports on unscrupulous human rights violations in China. At the same time, the foreign policy of the Chinese Communist Party is characterized by military threats against Taiwan and aggressive actions in the South China Sea. When rulers of autocratic states like Russia and China feel that they can assert their own interests unscrupulously and without resistance at the expense of others, they call our entire rule-based international order into question. And in order to promote peace, security, and our rule-based order, we have to intensify our relations with like-minded states. When we work together, the European Union is really or could be an important geopolitical power with considerable influence in the world. It is time that we, as the European Union, live up to our possibilities and increase our role as promoter for peace and democracy. In doing so, we should also deepen our alliances with our global partners. The United States has been a close partner to the European Union for a long time. So many of our partners in the Indo-Pacific are welcoming our growing military, political, and economic engagement in the region. And we should also use our good reputation in countries all over the world to strengthen our cooperation and stand together for a rule-based order. Our first national security strategy underlines very rightly a broader definition of security. It shows that we can no longer understand security in its own military terms only. Increasing our military presence in the region, in the Pacific, in close participation with our international partners is one important step. But such steps have to be accompanied by diplomacy with reduced economic dependencies with a sustainable economy. The protection of our security means that we develop a new foreign policy which corresponds to security in all its complexity, to support our partners, rule-based order and democracy. It also means to be very clear on our values and at the same time identify common goals and opportunities for cooperation. Or let me end with a very simple approach, but this is what I teach my 5-year-old daughter. Never let the bully win. Of course, this does not mean pick every stupid fight. It means be smart, look for partners, build alliances, maybe tell the educator, but never let the bully win. Thank you.
So the time has come to make you work. I would have a million questions for them, but I'd like to first turn to you as to whether you have questions. And I assume there would be more than one. Yes.
Thank you. Wu Kaishi. I am General Secretary, Taiwan Parliamentary Human Rights Commission. Dissident, veteran dissident, 34 years dissident against Chinese Communist Party since Tiananmen student movement. That's my background. Introducing that background, I expect you to hear some voices from the far side of the spectrum. We're supposed to be radical. We're supposed to be extreme. But let's decide if my comment on both Ivan's and Alexia's comment is rather extreme or reasonable. You mentioned, Ivan, in your speeches, challenging the United States promises to Taiwan. Challenging the United States promises to People's Republic of China when normalizing the relation is a recipe of instability. Is that correct?
I think that's how I framed it. But,
okay, yep.
Balance in which that's irrelevant.
Certainly. Instability is introduced by the People's Republic of China, not honoring any of their promises in the last 30, 40 years. And then also from a person being a dissident from the People's Republic of China, now living in Taiwan, I didn't like the term normalization with the People's Republic of China. But thank you so much. You put it clearly. The promises made, for instance, in the 1979 January 1st communique, U.S.-China normalization communique, indicate People's Republic of China is the only legal entity. Beijing regime is the only. I think it disagrees with every principle that the United States have held about definition of legal entity. Taiwan, on the other hand, the Taipei government, on the other hand, agree with every principle that you can find any dictionary or textbook that teaches in the United States is a legitimized, it's a legal government because it's democracy. And China is not. Beijing is not. The other thing about mutually agreement, like any change of status quo should be mutually agreed upon. Well, it should be peaceful. That part we agree, but should be mutually agreed upon. That's another thing that is extremely bad deal for Taiwan. The US communique in 1979, I just mentioned, was based on the fact at that time Taiwan is not democracy. So, okay, the both sides have a constitution that say we belong to one China. And then in this point, United States is also, and Europe was also saying you cannot change this status quo in 1979. Even when we changed to become a democracy, we do not have the right to change our constitution, to say we are not a same country with the People's Republic of China. We do not have the right. Why? Because US and Europe enforce us to say any challenge of the status quo should be agreed upon both sides. Why would Beijing agree with a democracy? They will not agree with Taiwan, and then you are helping Beijing to enforce, to stay the status quo that was set in 1979. And by the way, by someone named Dr. Henry Kissinger, and then still milking that relation with Beijing and become extremely fabulously rich in his 100 years old, where he is the most favorite guest of Beijing. And then his company called Kissinger and Associates charged $1 million for anybody, for a retainer fee for him to pave a good relation, good access to the China market. But United States and Europe is helping people like Kissinger's to hold that status quo we do not like in Taiwan. So,
thank you.
Yes.
For your comment. But did you have a question? I think it was a...
I think they know what I'm saying.
Yes. So you need now to turn to Janka and Angela, who both have a question. You go first, Angela.
Thank you for that excellent panel. I have a question for Ivan Feigenbaum. You just mentioned that a lot of people in the US would actually like to see the deal China and Taiwan got reversed or kind of altered. So could you elaborate a little bit of that? Would that mean like pushing more within the framework of unofficial relations, or where does this actually go, and which parts of the government are very pushing for that?
Janka.
I have two questions. One for Gudrun, because I was super intrigued by what you said about kind of how the framing was on the Chinese side about Lai Ching-te and how they were portraying him. Maybe you can say a little bit more about that, because in a way it's already digging a bit of a hole for the Chinese side that is harder to come out of. What was your perception there and how he was portrayed as the potential new president? And then for both German parliamentarians, a question of something that I think even in the research we are debating very highly at the moment is, if we say serious consequences, is it deterrent to just say serious consequences and not say what they are? Or do we need to spell them out? I don't think there is a kind of correct answer to this, but where your judgment is on this, I would be really intrigued about.
Now the representatives here. Matthias, in front. Thanks.
I'm the acting representative of Taiwan in Germany since 2016. In the last 2 years, or nearly 2 years, after the outbreak of the invasion war of Putin against Ukraine, I've been quite often asked the question, would the USA come over to support Taiwan in case of a Chinese attack? And I said, no, the Americans, they won't come. Why? They are your best friend. I say they won't come because they are already there. And my question is, if we recall what General MacArthur wrote on the 14th June 1950, that longer than 70 years ago, to his President Truman, in Washington, D.C. And it goes like this: since the fall of 1948, when the military capability of the Chinese communists to engulf all of the mainland of China became clearly evident, I have been concerned as to the future status of Formosa, meaning Taiwan, and I have been convinced that the strategic interests of the United States will be in serious jeopardy if Formosa is allowed to be dominated by a power hostile to the United States. That was 1950. And 1979, the long sentence of the Taiwan Relations Act is very short. It says this act is to help maintain the peace, security, and stability, not in the Taiwan Strait, in Western Pacific. And nearly 40 years later, on the 8th May 2022, it was written about Taiwan in the website of the United Secretary of State, and it's written as a leading democracy and a technological powerhouse. Taiwan is a key U.S. partner, not in the Western Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific. So my question is, can USA, according to these three documents, can USA afford it to lose Taiwan to the People's Republic of China? Can it? Because we have to think, we have to take into Japan, like I said, Japan, Philippines, and so on, maybe today Australia. Can we say it is possible that USA could be forced to let it happen?
Thank you. I think we have 4 excellent questions. I'm going to throw some as well, and then you can pick and choose what you're responding to. I think Agnieszka and Markus, you made a case about how liberal values do matter, and in the case of Taiwan, it matters even more. I can see from a foreign policy perspective how difficult it's becoming for Europeans to conduct a value-based foreign policy just because we are under strain. Can we still afford it? And have we moved to a different place? It's question mark for everything. I think, Gudrun, you make a point about the fact that we are getting better in Europe at understanding Taiwan and understanding the stake of it. And I'm wondering whether it's a bit related to Janke's question. Would we be ready to pay for the consequences? So it's not only about spelling out what the consequences would be, but by raising the costs, whether or not you mention the consequences, there is a price to pay. Are Europeans ready to pay that price? You made a reference to the war, Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. How much the war is impacting European thinking on Taiwan? I'd like to think it does. So careful with what you respond. Evan, I think you made extremely clear and you articulated for us what's the US vision, and the fact that the US has a securitized agenda because it responds to the interest, I mean, an interest-based approach. And I would agree with you that there is a combination where the EU should have skin on the game when it comes to trade and economic issues. I'd completely agree with you, but you know what? We are a year ahead of the elections, and from a European perspective, these elections are scary. And US elections. Yes, of course.
You were trying to forget that, right?
You were trying to forget that. And you know, we can have as many conversations we want as Europeans on putting more skin into the game, but at the end of the day, these elections are going to have a tremendous impact. So I suggest we start by you, Agnieszka. You went last, you go first.
Markus and I have been to Australia 3 weeks ago, and it was a very nice trip. We were a group of German members of Bundestag, which was a wonderful trip and very clever what we learned. But we had this common message to Australia: do not repeat the mistakes we made with Russia when you deal with China. And we got different answers from our Australian colleagues, and they had one point, yeah, Russia is not China, and you should not make the mistake to be very simple about that. But what I think, and this is part of the answer to your question, was the attempt and really a good try to prevent the Russian invasion on Ukraine is to send a very clear message, but it was too late and Putin had made his decision. But we are now in a different situation regarding Taiwan, because I think the Communist Party is looking very closely at our reactions to the brutal attacks on Ukraine, which are happening every day. And we should be very clear. And first, it's really not to say like this sentence, yeah, and you have to show it that you would act and you would be united. But on the other hand, we saw how long it took to prepare those sanctions when we saw the buildup of troops at the borders. So we do have to take actions to be prepared, and I think we should do both. We should not spell out every detail of our answer, which is like also the strategy President Biden is taking regarding the use of nuclear weapons towards Russia. We have no clear statement what consequence A, B, C, D will be, but we all believe that there will be very severe consequences. And on the other hand, I think, but I don't think everyone in the government would agree, we should also say, but we will do A, B, C when this happens, so that the Chinese side gets the impression that we are very serious about that. And of course, this all, and especially this step, would come with costs. But I'm returning to the point, we should not make the same mistakes Germany made with Russia. Looking only at the short-term costs, and not seeing the big risk that comes with quite bigger costs, and do not prepare for that, is quite more expensive at every level, and we saw that in a very, very brutal way regarding the invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, and to that I'm going to add that if we want, and if we think we have the capacity to pay the cost, it's certainly going to be at 27. And for that, you may wonder whether spelling out consequences is a good or a bad strategic move. And I think the question on sanctions and the debate in Europe about sanctions show that sometimes it's actually better to keep the consequences for yourself. Markus.
Yeah, but you should have a plan. You don't have to spell it out in every detail, but you should have one. And the thing is, when Russia attacked Ukraine, the German government had no plan. Our parties were just new in the coalition. We just entered the coalition some months before the invasion of Ukraine, and there was no plan. So I think you don't have to explain to China every detail of your plan, but you should have one. And unfortunately, there's none. There's none in Germany, and I doubt that the European Union has one. So yes, it should be spelled out somehow that we have one for different scenarios. So for economic sanctions from China to Taiwan or to other countries, for a blockade of Taiwan, for an invasion of Taiwan, should be different consequences, and there should be a plan, and there isn't one. So this is really a political goal we have to work on. And then I want to add to your question as well, value-based foreign policy. There's a value in that, but then there are also costs, as we've just heard. But do we actually do value-based foreign policy? So, because it would also mean to treat treat countries that do not follow our values a lot worse than countries that do follow our values. And I think we are treating everybody quite the same, and there should be a bigger distinguishing between both.
Thanks. I think Gudrun.
Okay, I start with Janka's question. I think our impression was lighting is worse from the Chinese perspective, so they are building, this option. They are convinced that he's likely to win. They are in support of this KMT-TPP arrangement for the LY election, so it's really about breaking the majority for the DPP in the parliament and then prepare from there for 2024 election. But, and here I have to agree with what Gunther Schubert said yesterday, in the end they don't care. They will take whatever government comes in Taiwan. And, it will probably make a difference in nuance. But don't expect any new, even if the Kuomintang and the TPP gang up and they miraculously win the presidential election, there will be no new concepts or new formulas or new anything. They clearly, we asked several times about Wang Huning's portfolio, etc. They said, he has nothing to say. I mean, he doesn't decide Taiwan policy. He can make a few nice rhetorical, new concepts, new ideas, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, it doesn't matter. And the only thing I hope is that, or I don't hope, I believe is that they will not make any big, flashy efforts to influence the elections, because usually that backfires. But I think Taiwan is, well advised to prepare for more disinformation, etc. So in the end, it doesn't matter to them who wins this election, because they are aware that the Kuomintang will not be able to solve the problem. I mean, they cannot hand over Taiwan to them, so it really doesn't make a big difference. I wanted to pick up on, are we prepared also? That was the question. First of all, I mean, look at our policy. We're all over the place. Borrell went to China and gave a speech at Beijing Daxue, where he basically said, we are against Taiwan independence. This is what you call, when you play tennis, an unforced error. To rush there and say something like that without even being asked about it. Why do we make declarations like that? So I think the Europeans are all over the place. First of all, there are the differences between the member states, and not everybody is Lithuania or the Czech Republic. Including Germany is not Lithuania or the Czech Republic. So we still have differences within the European Union. We have this division of labor, let's put it euphemistically in this way, where you have the executive branch being very, very cautious about anything, and the legislative branch being very, very pushy on certain issues. So this has to be reconciled at some point. I mean, the Chinese, they just shake their shoulders and say, so what? Yeah, we know that. So I think what we need is a much more consistent policy where we push back against the Chinese rhetoric of the one China principle being the universally accepted thing, UN General Assembly Resolution 2758, we have to actively push back against this kind of narrative. We should avoid this kind of unforced errors. And yes, we should make contingency planning in secret in whatever way. I'm against spelling out red lines, because once you have spelled them out, you have to follow up or you lose your credibility. And if we're not ready to follow through, and I don't think we are anywhere near even knowing the price that we would have to pay, or where unity, it will not suddenly from the sky for the European Union. So we have to work on that, and we should not do this in public. That's all I'm saying. And in the meantime, and that's my final point, we should expand our cooperation with Taiwan Evan pointed to the areas where this is possible, but this also requires on the Taiwanese side to give up on symbolism and be more pragmatic about it and, you know, put substance over form. Because often good agreements and good cooperation is not coming about because there is an insistence on certain wordings or whatever. And this will not help us. So one of the low-hanging fruits I see is that more Europeans join the global cooperation and training framework or outside that, because Taiwan has a lot to offer to us on gray zone activities, on disinformation. I mean, they're confronted with the entire toolbox of the Chinese have. And they are at the forefront there. So we can learn something from that. And we should push this kind of cooperative agenda, including in the economic area.
Okay, all right, I'll make 3 points. First, I want to endorse Gudrun's point. Language, strategy, experience matter. No US president has ever said what you just attributed to Mr. Burrell. No American president has ever said we oppose Taiwan independence. Never. Because it's not consistent with US interest, policy, intent. They've said other things, but they've never said that. All right. Second, to your question. I mean, essentially, there's a rhetorical question embedded in your very direct question. So the rhetorical question, as I heard it, is, you know, thanks for encouraging Europe to do all these things, but, you know, you may get a crazy guy in charge in the United States in a year, so what's in it for us? And,
He got it.
yeah, but I guess my answer, I mean, I'm very old-fashioned. I'm like an old-fashioned, interest-based, balance of power kind of guy. So my view is you should be as selfish about European interests as Americans are about American national interests. And if you're selfish about European interests, then you have every good reason to be working with Taiwan in areas that, number one, are important to Taiwan, number two, play to European competitive advantages, and I tried to outline a few of those. Okay? So Trump or no Trump, I think for selfish and self-interested reasons, Europe has every good reason to pursue those things with Taiwan. And that's why I'm just an American, not European, but I would encourage you to do so. I think it's good for you in addition to being good for Taiwan. And by the way, indirectly, it's good for the United States. Okay? Because the US would like some partners to be doing those things with Taiwan as well, so that we're not the only ones with, as you put it, skin in the game. Okay, there were a kind of a mix of questions from the floor. The general theme that ran through those, I'll exaggerate it a little bit for effect, was, you know, why does the United States continue to play footsie with Beijing, with these diplomatic fictions and these pretty words and normalization commitments that go back to 1970? Well, you know, what is that about? I think, if I may be blunt about it, we don't have, you know, for an America, we don't have the luxury of a value-free foreign policy. We also don't have the luxury of a foreign policy that pretends questions of war and peace don't actually matter, because Americans have done quite a lot of fighting and dying over the last several decades. And so if you're the president of the United States, those questions actually matter, not least how you explain them to the American people, okay? So because we don't live in a world of leprechauns, rainbows, unicorns, and fairies, the reality is, whether we like it or not, Beijing actually gets a vote on what Beijing does. It is not for Americans to decide what the Chinese Communist Party is going to do or not do. So whether we like it or not, they get to decide how they're going to respond or not respond to various actions. And so prudent strategy requires us to at least take that into account. Then we can decide whether it's in our interest to confront them or not, take that seriously or not, pay the price or not, run the risk or not. But if you're the president of the United States, you can't look the American people in the face and say that stuff, that doesn't matter, because it's just word games. Okay, so my response to you is that, and my response to the general mix of questions is that I think the American view is that while this is all a bit of a fiction, and yes, there are word games, and these are things that diplomats do, the reality is for the last 40 or 50 years, we've basically had a situation in which Taiwan has made this transition to democracy. You pointed out, War Kaishi, 1979 when they commit, well, okay, so in the 80s and beyond, Taiwan is a thriving democracy. So this framework hasn't worked so badly for Taiwan's democracy. And what's more, we haven't had a war in the Western Pacific yet. So the American view is it's not working out too badly. Now, this goes to your question, is where do people want to push the envelope? The reality is, I think people feel that both Taiwan's democracy and its aspirations and reality require that we try to run greater risks than we might have 30 or 40 years ago. That it's in our interest to push that envelope. And so my very direct answer to your very direct question is, at the extreme, people would like to basically undo the normalization agreement and recognize Taiwan as an independent country. That's not happening because of these questions around war and peace and the risks we run with Beijing. But there are a lot of people who would like to push the envelope, do more with Taiwan, intensify the interaction with Taiwan, and that is happening every day in all sorts of ways, including in the security area. And so, you know, that will push until the US has to recalibrate. That's what policymaking is about. So at the end of the day, that's what presidents have to do. And I mean, I think where we are in American policy making now is that Americans generally speak, the zeitgeist is that people would like to do as much as possible with Taiwan in the context of a much more confrontational relationship with China, but would not like to do so in a way that tips this thing into a war. And so in a world of reality, that's what presidents ask their advisors to think about. And so when President Biden or President Trump or whoever looks at Jake Sullivan or looks at Mike Pompeo, that's the question they have to answer, is when I go on TV and say, my fellow Americans, you know, tonight I've issued an execute order that sends American forces to do X, Y, or Z. They need to explain why that's the case in a way that's credible to the American people. And so if the answer to that is that we've done everything possible, including with our partners in Taiwan, to prudently manage cross-strait relations, and despite that, this regime in Beijing has done X and therefore we must respond. That's one thing. But if what you're asking is, will the United States fight a war of independence on behalf of Taiwan, that's not a realistic scenario for any president of the United States, at least under current constraints. So I think it's messy, it's not pretty. This is I mean, pardon my bad language, this is the bullshit that American diplomats do. But I think the view is that, look, generally speaking, the existing framework is probably better within the ambit of some envelope pushing than to ditch the framework entirely. So if you're asking me to ditch the framework, I don't think anybody in the American strategic class is going to go there right now. But we'll see where the relationship with China goes. Hope that answers your question. Not in a satisfactory way for you, but in a way that I think most presidents of either party would look themselves in the mirror and, okay.
Thanks. And before giving back the floor to Rainer to actually conclude, I think you made an important point, Evan, that policymaking is about pushing. And I think in the case of Taiwan, Europeans have been more reactive mode rather than shaping and pushing. And I think we have some food for thought out of this for Europe: more consistency, more preparedness, increased cooperation in a strategic way, move away from semiconductor and democracy, because there is a much broader agenda. And we certainly have to make a Trump 2 proof policy ahead of a year that promises to be extremely unstable when it comes to the region. Thanks a lot.
Keep there. Okay. You get your present right away. Let me just shortly conclude this second Berlin Taiwan Conference. Somebody said earlier today, this might not have happened a couple of years ago. I think that's adequate description. But the fact that we've been having these two conferences now, last year and this year, the fact that we have such intense and high-quality debates, the fact that we have such a positive resonance, and that you can see the building of a network of engaged people from different parts of society, including from different parts of the political spectrum. I think that reflects some of the positive changes that are happening indeed in this country, and more broadly around Europe also, with regard to relations with Taiwan. And we have heard a lot of good advice, how we can foster that relationship. And I hope that all that have a chance of implementing such advice will have listened very carefully. I am quite convinced that there will continue to be positive steps in the German context. I do think that Professor Xie knows what I think of, and I want to invite everybody of you to stay involved. And it need not be the only Taiwan event of the year, but hopefully we will be able to assemble again a year from now and see what progress we have made. I want to thank all of you who have participated. In particular, I want to thank all our guests who have come from afar, from the US, from Japan, from Taiwan, from many other places. Thank you very much. For me, this has been a very educational, very rewarding exercise. So I wish you a good day, and thanks again. I will go back and look at the video. Yeah.